A white member of leadership asks me, a black man, where is your master? And I lose my job. Okay. Hey y'all, welcome to my YouTube channel. There's quite a few of you that are new. It is rather unfortunate that I haven't been able to celebrate my success and the community that I built on here, but another day, another time. Today's video is rather a serious one. I'm just gonna try to get through this because I have 1,000,001 things to do. This past Friday, I was unjustly terminated from my job at Hope and Help of Central Florida. I do believe that this was an act of retaliation in response to all the complaints that me and my coworkers have brought forth in regards to discrimination, racism, transphobia, and retaliation since October. I just wanna jump into it. Today's video is serving the purpose of documentation, sharing my experience, and just giving me an outlet to release emotionally. So my employment with Hope and Help began August 28th, but for context, there was an all-hands meeting that took place August 16th. This meeting took place with my two other staff members, my coworkers, Anita Nunez and Lamia Makadam. Lamia Makadam is the supervisor. She's the manager who oversees our department for the Syringe Exchange at Hope and Help of Central Florida. Anita Nunez was the health educator. I was the linkage and volunteer coordinator. This all-hands meeting I wasn't present for, but I do have a couple notes and a synopsis of it. So I will provide some context and perspective because this meeting ultimately laid the groundwork and the foundation for some of the energy that we received moving forward. And this meeting would be the first indicator of a cultural instability, toxic work culture that existed at Hope and Help. Before I get into the details and the nitty-gritty, I want to also mention that I will make a link available to you all. We have a full 40-page doc with emails, screenshots, Teams messages, etc. that will provide you with enough perspective and a timeline from the all-hands meeting up until now. So this all-hands meeting was facilitated by a trans speaker in Lamia Makadam. The overall intent and purpose of that meeting was to provide folk with language on trans inclusion, proper pronoun usage, but in addition to address prior concerns and instances of transphobia that took place within the organization. It is my understanding that the overall intentions of this meeting were derailed. The conversation went in a completely different direction. Tensions arose. People were on the defense. They were misgendering the trans speaker who was invited to facilitate the conversation. They did not take well to Lamia Makadam, Anita Nunez, or the trans speaker that was invited to speak. It was a mess. So before we even started this job, we inherited a culture problem and a stigma that we were just not privy to, we weren't expecting. For context, we were working within the Syringe Exchange department. If you don't know what harm reduction is, I would urge you to look that up. But to give you a brief overview, we were working with people who inject drugs. We provide them with clean syringes, safe injection materials in order to mitigate the spread of HIV, Hep C. We are the one syringe exchange in all of Central Florida. And I want to take this moment to emphasize that this program would not run as efficiently, it would not exist in the way that it does if not for Aisha Wilson's work and all the trauma that she went through the hands of Hope and Help leadership. Aisha Wilson, with the help of Maria Monaco, one of the most beautiful souls I've ever met, they are both responsible for the growth and success of the Syringe Exchange program at Hope and Help of Central Florida. We're now going to move into the first incident that I reported to upper leadership. I hope so far I painted a concise picture of the toxic work culture that we were thrust into. So this second incident that I reported took place between me and a coworker by the name of Morgan Manry. He's a white man. He's the patient assistance coordinator at Hope and Help. Before I get into the details of what took place, I'm going to describe the type of person this man is, his personality, and why I made it a point to maintain some sort of distance. Morgan Manry is your typical white coworker whose entire personality is saying things left field, off the cuff. He has no filter. He gets off on being antagonistic. He carries himself throughout the office with this overperformed, excessive bravado air of confidence. I'm not sure if it's as a result of like underlying self-esteem issues, but it's very clear that he's adopted this whole mean girl, Regina George, white, mean, gay persona. With that being said, through personal observance and through word of mouth from my coworkers, I noticed that this man got off on instigating conflict. My coworker, Anita Nunez, cited instances where this man expressed glee and kicking out unhoused, underprivileged folk out of the Hep C program. He's the patient assistance coordinator at the organization. And one of the functions of his role as a patient assistance coordinator is to assist people without insurance, without the monetary funds, get into a Hep C program and find the funds to cover their treatment. He also oversees the emergency food pantry, which is a free advertised service that we offer to our participants, to our clients who are unhoused and battling food insecurity. Whenever we would try to make use of the emergency food pantry pantry service, there were always issues. Till this day, we don't know why. He's never provided a reason or excuse. Personally, I maintain the belief that he did not want to be bothered to replenish the emergency food pantry, having to make these bags and just do his basic job. We had to jump through hoops in order to obtain the key to access the emergency food pantry in order to provide those services to our clientele. Because we're working with unhoused folk, we're working with people who inject drugs. Oftentimes with this specific demographic of people, this is their first time re-engaging with the healthcare system. People who inject drugs, Black folk, persons of color are already heavily stigmatized. And so within the practice of harm reduction and syringe exchange, not only are we attempting to meet people where they're at, but we are also cognizant of the fact that we want this person to stay in care. We want these people to make use of our resources. So we will do everything in our power to limit barriers of access to care. After repeated instances of difficulty in trying to obtain the key to this emergency food pantry, after my own personal observances, it became very clear to me that if I wanted to keep this job and I wanted to continue serving my patients, I would need to maintain distance between myself and this person. And the amount of difficulty and obstacles we were coming across in order to obtain the service for our participants was taking away time from their care. So I had a conversation with the prevention director, Amanda Cruz, and my supervisor, Lamia McAdam, and notified them that should any of the clients in our program ask us to access the emergency food pantry, we would have to unfortunately tell them we've discontinued the program and that we are working to find other funding sources to circumvent the obstacles this man has set in our path. Both members of leadership agreed. Now, I want to note one of my other coworkers, Anita Nunez, was not present for this conversation. I also want to note that several clients within our syringe exchange program had issued several complaints about this man and his attitude. So on October 6th, one of our clients requested a snack pack from the emergency food pantry. As I had discussed with leadership, I had informed the participant that we are no longer offering the service and we will keep them in the loop once we've started our own emergency food pantry without having to go through patient assistance. My coworker Anita Nunez happened to overhear this conversation and she was like, no, the emergency food pantry is still open. Those services are still available. We can go get you one now. Again, she wasn't present for that conversation I had with leadership, so this was just an instance of miscommunication. So me and Anita walk around the office looking for specific members of leadership who would have the key. We get our hands on one. We walk over to the pantry. She puts the key in the lock. The lock won't turn. She tries again. We're like, this is weird. This has never happened before. That is when we realize the locks on the door have been changed. To confirm that the locks on the doors have been changed, we seek out the assistance of the janitor. And he indeed confirms that the locks were changed by Morgan Manry in the patient assistance department. So at this point, we're like, okay, whatever. We have a client waiting for us. We're just gonna go to his office and ask him to help us get a bag. We walk to his office. He agrees to open the door for us. We're walking from his office to the pantry. We get to the pantry and y'all, this man turns around, looks at the both of us and asks, unprovoked, where's your master? Me and Anita look at each other like, what is he talking about? We wait a couple of seconds. We're trying to figure out, like, what is he trying to say? Is he asking us, where's your master key? But even that wouldn't make sense because he just had the locks on the door changed. And even before then, he never made it to where that we could have access to the key. It was only staff members and personnel that he approved of that would have access to the emergency food pantry and would have access to a key. So we're honestly just dumbfounded. We're like confused. Like, what is this man talking about? He sees the look of confusion register on our face. And then he follows up with, y'all aren't going to answer my question. I'm asking you, where is your manager? And that is when he confirms that his way of asking us, where is your manager, was to ask me, a Black man, in the presence of a trans woman, where is your master? At this point, my spirit is vexed. And I'm standing there like, this is why I did not want to engage with him. This is why I did not want to speak with him. Because he thinks that he can just say these things off cuff with no regard for people, no filter, with no regard for how it'll emotionally impact, mentally impact a person. Just white, Southern, and racist. So after he says that, I happen to be standing next to a chain linked fence to which I completely averted my gaze to. I wanted my energy to read, do not approach me, do not speak to me, do not engage me. I completely shut down because at this point I'm having to keep my cool, my calm, and my composure just to keep my job. He sees that I'm looking towards the chain link fence and he now pointedly addresses me again, unprovoked, and asks, are you scared of the chain link fence? A lot of people are. Y'all, we left that interaction, nothing more was said. I went straight to HR. Anita and I went to HR. We roped in other members of senior leadership. We shared with them the circumstances that ultimately led up to having to engage with him. And to their surprise, they didn't even know the locks on the emergency food pantry were changed. This man changed the locks on the emergency food pantry, a vital resource to the very communities that we serve, without notifying anybody from our department. In the meeting that we had with HR and several members of leadership, every single person had confirmed that Morgan had had prior instances of cultural insensitivity and making racially insensitive remarks. Every member of leadership in that room, including HR, told me directly, shared with us directly, that Morgan has had multiple documented instances of racism and cultural insensitivity in the workplace. How does he still have the job? I'm thinking, well, this is a given. Somebody shows you who they are, you take direct action. Why does he still have a job? Why does he still have a job? And why did y'all allow it to get this far and subject your employees to that level of disrespect? More recently, there was a young Black staff member, a Black man, who had documented instances where this man was referring to him as boy, calling him prevention boy. If you're Black living in the South, if you're Black anywhere regardless, you know what it means when a white Southern man refers to a Black person, a Black man, as boy. We know it's their way of asserting dominance, racial superiority. And I said all this in the email, I said all this in the meeting. I provided them with the historical basis for why that language is problematic and why I personally took offense to it. As I'm explaining all this, I see HR scribbling away at a notepad. I'm like, okay, I hope to see something happen. I hope to see actions taken against him. I also want to share that in these meetings I had with senior members of leadership, they also told me that Morgan happens to have a very good relationship with the executive director. They have rapport. And it is for that reason why he's been able to skirt accountability for so long. It was after that point I was like, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And I made the decision I was going to document every conversation I had in writing. Before I move on to the next incident we reported, I just want to note for the record, Morgan was on the phone sharing confidential, personal, private information about a patient currently in care at our organization with an undisclosed person. This concern was forwarded to HR. HR made note of it. HR was in receipt of that complaint. Nothing has been done. He still has a job. I'm fired. The third incident we reported was one involving my coworker, Lamia Makadam. As I stated earlier, Lamia is the supervisor and the overall director for the Syringe exchange program at Hope and Help of Central Florida. They are a well-known activist and organizer within the Central Florida community, most known for their work with pro-Palestine coalitions and organizations. For those who follow me on IG or TikTok, you may actually remember me crowdfunding on her behalf to cover her bail fund so we could get her released. Lamia had taken time off. She was off the clock. She was not in uniform. Our organization hired her knowing exactly who she was in the community and what she meant to the community. Lamia has a previous arrest dating back to 2020 during the Black Lives Matter actions. HR knew this. Matter of fact, HR called it a badge of honor. So this is nothing new to them. They're fully aware of Lamia's activism within the community in Central Florida. I want to say a couple of days after that arrest.
Hey y'all, just stepping in really quickly to mention that she was arrested at a pro-Palestine protest. Ultimately, that was the catalyst for why they issued her the final written warning. It's because she was arrested at a pro-Palestine protest.
Lamia comes back into work. HR calls her into a meeting with the prevention director and they issue her a final written warning despite no prior instances of misconduct, disciplinary actions taken against her. In this write-up, they essentially say her activism outside of the workplace is not aligned with the mission, goals, and values of Hope and Help. But in addition, in this write-up, they issue a directive stating that she cannot wear her cultural and ethnic garments, more specifically her keffiyeh. I want to note for the record, Lamia has always worn her keffiyeh. At that point, she had been wearing it for days, weeks, months, I don't know how long, before they even issued her the write-up. What's interesting is around the same time, we have another coworker who had no hesitations voicing his support for the state of Israel, going as far as sending Israeli flags into the staff organization-wide group chat. And he was not met with not even a modicum of the heat they applied on Lamia. Matter of fact, the HR manager and the executive director herself was actively engaging and liking this man's messages in the group chat. Now, there's something I want to emphasize here. The HR manager, Wes Golan, he issued Lamia the write-up, but make no mistake, the executive director herself was most certainly puppeteering this decision in the background. Matter of fact, West confirmed this to a senior member of leadership. In addition, we have screenshots showing the executive director using her personal Instagram account to surveil and stalk Lamia. We have screenshots of this woman watching her story and even accidentally liking one of Lamia's posts. So I want to be very clear in implicating the executive director and further enabling a culture of surveillance, because up until this point, they're trying to sew this narrative together that the executive director has maintained a respectful distance from all these instances that have been reported. She has no idea, no clue, was not made aware of any of these instances. But I want to be very clear, the reason why she has been intentional in maintaining that distance is because she's been through this before. She's been called to task on her racism and the toxic culture in which she enables at the organization. After we as a team had been made aware that Lamia was written up and issued a final written warning, and after Lamia had been made aware that the executive director had been surveilling her personal social media accounts, it became very clear to us that boundaries were being crossed and we needed to get other members of leadership involved because it's getting suspiciously weird. So it was for that reason we drafted a letter to the board and we notified them of our concerns. Around this time, I'm still waiting on word. I'm still waiting on confirmation around what actions were taken against Morgan. I'm trying to figure out how HR had all the time in the world to swiftly issue Lamia a final written warning, but I, one of the few Black persons within the organization who brought forth concerns around cultural insensitivity, outright discrimination, racism, and anti-Blackness, I have yet to hear an update. This white man who actively sought out to disrespect me and my coworker is still employed at the organization. That doesn't make sense to me. So I remember holding a meeting with the HR manager, asking him, hey, have there been any updates on, this case with Morgan, any of the things that I reported to you? Y'all, tell me why this man looks at me like I'm crazy. Like the look on his face was like how dare you? Like, why would I share that information with you? And he proceeds to tell me he cannot inform me of the actions that were taken against Morgan. He cannot inform me about updates regarding the case, that I should not worry about it. It's already been handled and I should just leave it alone. I'm like, okay, all right. Okay, and I want to be clear, this did not come as a surprise to me. Matter of fact, in the meeting I had with him, I outright stated, I don't trust that HR will be able to handle this situation in the ways that I need them to handle it. Nonetheless, should that be the case, I would still like to have a conversation on what measures will be instituted to protect me and my coworkers and ensure that we're able to do our job and access the services that our clientele is owed. He took note of that concern and he assured me that he would follow up. He would let me know about protections in the workplace. He would end up having a conversation with Morgan, but none of that was disclosed to me. There was never a follow-up. There was not even an email. Matter of fact, I had to find out from another member of leadership that Morgan did in fact have a conversation with HR. He denied that there was any malicious intent or any harm done. Matter of fact, his proposed solution to leadership was that the affected parties, members of the Syringe exchange program, come to his office and pack the items for the emergency food pantry. Y'all, the unmitigated gall. When leadership brought this to us, I had to explain to them, what sense does it make that we bring forth concerns around racism and anti-Blackness? We brought forth concerns around a white Southern man asking us, where's your master? And his response, his proposed solution is to have us do his job for him. I mean, till this day, no words. Nonetheless, after that meeting I had with HR, I said I'm going to send an email because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to continue speaking to whomever need be, continue following up with emails, and engage in my protected activity under EEOC laws and provisions. Period. We sent the letter to the board the 29th of November. December 15th, they responded back to our concerns. The board essentially sided with HR and the executive director. They stated everything that we've reported falls under the purview of HR. They will not intervene. But furthermore, they deem HR and the executive director's actions to be consistent with internal policies and procedures. At this point, we are left with Absolutely no resolution. Around this time, the senior operations director and our preventions director acted as a buffer between our team and upper management, upper leadership, HR, the executive director. I want to say it was either the beginning of December or towards the end of December, the senior operations director left onto better and bigger opportunities. So now that leaves our prevention director, Amanda Cruz. I'm not sure if I mentioned earlier, when HR issued the final written warning to Lamia, the prevention director was present for that meeting and in attendance. She refused to sign on because she knew that this was wrong. She felt very uncomfortable with the actions HR and the executive director were taking against Lamia, and she did not hesitate to voice those concerns. She also never hesitated to voice her concerns around previous instances of transphobia in the all-hands meeting. This woman throughout the entire process did nothing but advocate on behalf of her team, advocate on behalf of her department. During her tenure at the organization, Hope and Help saw record numbers. Prevention was meeting all the deliverables. We were making a significant impact in the community. Our Syringe exchange program was exponentially growing in numbers. 4 days after the board responds to our letter, Amanda Cruz is unjustly terminated. On her way out, she was told by Dawn Sipley, who is the head of Simply the Best, and I quote, "At least you'll get to enjoy the holidays with your family." For context, Simply the Best is a local HR firm that the organization sought the services for post the all hands meeting. I don't know what purpose this woman served at the organization. I don't know what work she was doing, but for a time she was acting on behalf of the executive director. I just want to say that comment in specifically, but also the timing in which they fired her right before the holidays, right before Christmas, was disgusting. And that comment was very intentional and made very pointedly because Amanda has a young child. Amanda has a baby. Practically a newborn that she just gave birth to not too long ago. So I think that comment was just very lowbrow. Her entire world just shattered. She just lost her source of income, and here you are making light of a situation truly abhorrent. The reasons the executive director cited for her termination were so, you could just tell they were coming up with any and everything. These were outright exaggerated claims and mischaracterizations. And there are things that I cannot share, as I do not want to further expose or share personal details around Amanda's termination. But just know that there's enough proof in conversation and in writing to substantiate that the executive director not only unjustly terminated Amanda Cruz, but it was an act of retaliation. I'm based in Florida. We are an at-will state, which means that they can cite any reason or not cite any reasons for why they would terminate somebody's employment. But for me, it was in that instance that I saw in real time how far leadership was willing to go to dispose of marginalized folk, persons of color who have been working diligently on behalf of the organization. How far they would be willing to go to silence their employees, how far they would be willing to go to make an example out of people who were calling leadership to task. After finding out this information, staff members within the organization took to the company-wide group chat to share their remorse and to share their appreciation for Amanda's leadership and everything that she's done for the prevention team. And in that moment, I took the opportunity to share my remorse about her termination, but to also highlight my genuine concerns around all the instances of cultural insensitivity, racism, and discrimination I reported. How troubling it was for me that those concerns fell on deaf ears, yet swift action was taken against Lamia. Swift action was taken against Amanda, and it very much felt retaliatory. And so I shared that message into the group chat to relay those genuine concerns and to also let staff in on, like, this is something you guys should be concerned about. Like, this is something we all should be taking note of. We should all be holding a meeting for. We should all implore leadership, HR, the executive director, to take the optics of this into consideration. What message are you sending to your staff? What culture are you guys trying to foster here? It does not build or strengthen a relationship of trust between leadership and their staff. Y'all want to know what HR's response was to me sharing that message in the group chat? He kicked me out. He kicked me out of the group chat. He kicked me out of the group chat with the intent to cut off the line of communication I had with my staff members. I want to say a minute or two after he kicked me out of the group chat, I think it dawned on him the optics of that action and how that looked to the rest of the staff. So he added me back into the group chat and messaged me on the side. At this point, I've completely shut down. My mind, I don't have, even now as I'm explaining it, my mind, I don't have language for it. I cannot believe that this is what I'm dealing with right now. He's messaging me on the side, telling me to delete the message I sent into the group chat. I'm texting my supervisor. I'm texting Lamia like, did you see what just happened? Like, this is crazy. She follows up with her own message in the group chat, to which the HR manager reacts to her message with a tomato can emoji. y'all, this shit is in different areas. Like, so post the messages and events that took place within the group chat. The executive director sends out an email, and this is what she says. I want to make note of the last sentence in her email. If you find it challenging to align with our values, we encourage open communication with HR to explore potential solutions outside of the organization. If that is not a clear display of negligence and a lack of regard for genuine concerns your Black employee brought forth, I don't know what is. This woman has no care in the world, no regard for the well-being of her staff. The response was devoid of compassion. The response was soulless. And I find it deeply unserious that the proposed solution was, if you have an issue, take your concerns to the personnel who just kicked you out of the group chat. Take your concerns to the HR personnel who actively sought to silence you. Speak to him. Is that not poor leadership? Is that not negligence? Like, let's be for real. Let's be so for real. I want to say maybe a week or two later, December 28th, after that fiasco in the group chat, HR sent out a document, a mutual arbitration agreement. And I want to read y'all the language contained in this document. The employee and company are giving up the right to a jury trial or to file a lawsuit in court against the other, and the right to bring a class or collective action against the other in court or in arbitration. Y'all want to guess what they were trying to do here? You know, for a lot of people, when their job sends out documents and they ask them to sign, nobody's gonna take the time to read through pages worth of documents, read through all of that legal jargon. Like, no, they're just gonna sign it. I don't care what anybody says. I fully believe this was done to subtly coerce a knowing staff into signing a document that would relinquish their rights. If you're not guilty, if you know you're legally abiding by the law, you're following protocol, you're doing your job as an HR manager, you're doing your job as an executive director, why send out this document? Why send this document to your staff? Especially given the timing. Obviously, my team and I read through the document. As soon as we read the entire thing, we alerted whoever was willing enough to listen. We explained to them what that language meant, and should they sign, they would essentially be signing away their rights. Thankfully, to our knowledge, nobody did. So after some of the staff expressed concerns around the language in the document, the executive director sent out an email to the organization stating that they sent the documents prematurely. They didn't mean for people to sign them. Do I believe that? I don't. And I want to note, during my onboarding process, I did not sign a mutual arbitration agreement. None of us did. That was not a document included in any of our onboarding packets. This was a completely new document that none of us recognized, none of us have ever seen, none of us have ever signed. A little bit after this, around I think it was January 9th, I received an email from a law firm from an associate attorney. This person stated in their email that they're conducting a private and independent investigation into concerns that me and some other staff brought forward in our letters to the board. This would be one of the few instances where me and my coworkers were officially made aware that Hope and Help, the organization, had retained legal representation. After doing some research, I find out that this firm has had a long-standing relationship with the organization, and this is not a private independent investigator. This is legal representation representing Hope and Help, reaching out to speak with me. I'm not unsmart, so I declined. I don't have legal representation myself. Allegedly, the lawyer they sought out to represent them is known as like the Barracuda of employment law. I've never heard of this woman. But nonetheless, I did not care to speak. Because when I reached out to the board, it was with the intent, it was with the hope that they would carry out an impartial, unbiased investigation. Not one in service to the organization, but one in service to the staff. This would be one of many instances where the board of the organization would outright lie to me and mischaracterize some of the details, because they would go on to tell me, hey, we hired an independent third-party private investigator who reached out to speak with you, but you denied to speak with them. No. That's the law firm. That is the lawyer, the law firm the organization has retained. Why are you lying? I don't seek to have my words misconstrued. I don't seek to compromise myself or my coworkers. Weeks go by and the incident that takes place during the middle of this month is ultimately what leads to the dissolution of our team and the infliction of more trauma. My coworker, Anita Nunez, who is a trans woman, had been for the past 7-8 months asking the janitor to correctly gender her. Anita had always shared with me that she felt like the janitor just unnecessarily fixated on her and targeted her, being nitpicky, overly obsessive, just overall insufferable. On February 2nd, a transphobic verbal assault ensued between Anita Nunez and the janitor at Hope and Help. As I stated previously, it had been months of him nonstop misgendering her. And so on that day specifically, after months having endured that, she decided to respectfully engage him and ask, hey, would you be willing to use my correct pronouns? He asks for her last name. She's like, why is that relevant? That's not of use. Like, I gave you the pronouns that you can use to correctly gender me, so just go by that. But essentially, it's this whole back and forth of him refusing to gender her correctly, refusing to use her name. And finally, when he gets a hold of her last name, he refers to her as Mr. Nunez. And then he tells her that if she has an issue with it, take it to HR. He's been here for 35 years. It's never been an issue. Calls her hermano, which is like brother for Spanish. I mean, just outright disgusting, transphobic. All of this which Anita Nunez documented, and there were 2 other staff members who were a witness to that interaction that also documented, followed up with their own emails corroborating everything Anita stated. After Anita and those 2 staff members sent in their emails to HR, I think a couple of days went by. Anita tried to follow up with HR asking about protections, asking for a follow-up, like what was being done, because she's still having to work alongside this man. Like, he's still walking around the office. At some point in that conversation, he pulls out a Pope keychain and says, this is why. He pulls out that Pope keychain in response to Anita asking him, like, why haven't actions been taken against this janitor? She left that conversation unclear, trying to figure out, like, why did he bring up the Pope? And I told her, like, girl, you need to follow up with an email or a Teams message of some sort and get some clarification, because if he's saying what I'm thinking he's saying, this is a new low. Sure enough, she follows up, and in that conversation, he explains to her that the janitor cited religious reasons for why he refuses to gender her properly. Which, to me, I'm just like, if you've been working here for so long, first of all, we're working at an AIDS service organization. You've been working here for so long. You've been working amongst LGBTQIA plus folk during your entire tenure, and if you being a Catholic barred you from embracing or supporting or working alongside LGBTQIA plus folk, why are you working at this clinic? Why are you here? Upon further conversation, and we have Teams chat, screenshots, and messages for this, you will see in the documents I provided HR sending articles to Anita Nunez in an effort to explain how, oh no, the Catholic Church, the Pope supports and loves trans women. He supports trans women. And like, it's very clear through these messages that he may be Catholic himself, right? Like, this is just an assumption I'm making, allegedly. He's making an effort to defend and provide justifications for the religious institution which the janitor cited for not gendering her correctly. Reading those messages felt like an episode straight out of The Office. Like, the boundaries that are being crossed, the level of unprofessionalism being displayed. And you'll see in those conversations, Anita is now forced to engage with this man and send back articles. She even sent an article detailing and highlighting how the Pope likened trans folk to nuclear weapons. And it is after this back and forth exchange that the HR manager's like, oh my God, like, I didn't know this information and blah, 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 blah. And he proceeds to ask her to dispose of his keychain for him. The amount of cringe and embarrassment I'm feeling even right now as I'm explaining this to you. Everything about it reeks of performance. It's like, you are incompetent as an HR personnel. You are incompetent as a leader. And this was an extreme violation of boundaries. After the in-person meeting, after those Teams chats, Anita felt like, you know what, at this point, it's too much. We've witnessed enough the past 6, 7, 8 months. I'm calling it quits. And so she turned in her resignation. She ended up writing this detailed resignation letter that she wanted all of the staff to see. Before I get to the details surrounding that, the executive director, second in command, this would be, I think, the chief deputy executive director, that woman's nephew. He is the big boss, the COO for a company, an IT company that runs the organization's servers. These servers are what our electronic communications devices run on. Thus, should the organization want to see what emails we're sending, what conversations we're having, they have access to it. And in all the situations I detailed for you guys throughout this video involving, us sending something into the organization's group chat or sending an email, occasionally the service would go down. And the timing of it always coincidentally lined up with when, we shared something with the staff, we publicized concerns that we had made to leadership, or we sent out an email to the board. So when Anita sent this resignation letter, she attempted to forward the email to all staff members of the organization. Not even a couple seconds after she sent it, she got a kickback message from the server stating you have to be an authorized user in order to send messages, send emails to all members. After seeing that, we were like, okay, we'll find another way. And we found a way to circumvent that issue and sent the email individually to all staff members. In support of my coworker and wanting to amplify her message, I personally sent her letter to a group chat with most of the organization staff members. In response to me forwarding Anita's letter into the group chat, HR just leaves the conversation. He leaves the group chat. There's a little bit of back and forth that takes place between employees. There are some employees who share concerns around where the organization is heading. The HR manager is re-added into the group chat, and then he sends this message. And I'm like, yet again, another instance where you're trying to silence and marginalize folk who are speaking out, who are calling for accountability. And at this point, I'm fed up. My department is now one team member down. Leadership keeps telling us what we can't do, what we can't say, who we can't speak to. And so I share with him flat out, what are we supposed to do? Who are we supposed to report to? We've shared our concerns with you and you've done nothing. You've done absolutely nothing. You ignore that poor excuse of an executive director. Y'all are willfully disregarding the well-being of your staff members. Y'all have been doing it for months now. And now, as a result, a trans woman has been forced to leave and vacate her position, give up her livelihood, her way of making money, just to preserve the little bit of sanity that she has left, just to protect her mental health. And sure enough, in Hope and Help fashion, I was removed from the group chat and the entire group chat was disabled. Shortly after, Lisa Barr sent out an email to all staff members, leaving me out, leaving Lamia out. In this email, she addresses to all staff. She writes that Anita's claims written in her resignation letter are inconsistent and inaccurate. In other words, trying to frame her out to be a liar. And she does so comfortably because she knows that the rest of the staff aren't privy to the team's messages that took place between HR and Anita. She knows that the team isn't privy to the investigation, or again, the lack thereof, that did not take place. And in reading this letter that a staff member shared with me, by the way, since I wasn't CC'd on the email, I'm like, no, this is not what we're going to do. You're not going to try what you tried with Amanda. You're not going to mischaracterize her. You're not going to demoralize her and try to sweep everything under the rug. So I put together a 12-page document, which is probably the second half of the document I've made available to you guys. Titled it, Lisa is a Liar. Screenshots, evidence of all the team chat conversations Anita had with the HR manager. I sent proof of the 2 emails both witnesses had written to support Anita's statement to HR. Oh my God, and I forgot to mention, post Lisa Barr, the executive director, sending out that email, I was issued a final written warning for forwarding Anita's resignation letter to all staff. In Anita's resignation letter, she asserts that there's a level of white woman fragility that we've all been having to contend with and deal with because the executive director refuses to assume responsibility for the instability at the organization. In the final written warning they issued me, they essentially said that I was participating in the discrimination of the white woman, the executive director, because I forwarded correspondence that contained language outright naming that white woman fragility. So yeah, I forgot to mention that, but in the email I ultimately ended up sending, I attached the 12-page document with all the evidence, and I also attached screen caps of my write-up, my final written warning that they issued me, and I addressed it to the board of the organization, all of senior leadership, HR, the executive director herself, and all of the staff members. I also would like to add that they waited until Lamia left the property to issue me the final written warning. It's customary that when they're issuing disciplinary actions, they have the supervisor of the department present. At this point, they had purposefully been leaving Lamia out of conversations, out of leadership meetings, out of emails, and also purposely leaving her out of conversations that she was supposed to be present for with her staff. The board ended up responding with an email to the 12-page document that I had sent. They addressed none of the concerns I shared in that document. There was not a single point, sentence, paragraph in that email where the board addressed their HR manager engaging in unprofessional conversations about religion and transphobia with their employee. The board did not address Lisa's negligence. Matter of fact, they used all the characters available to them to demoralize me, call me inflammatory, essentially frame me to be problematic, said that I was disparaging the executive director and other staff members. If you go look at the document I put together for them, where I laid everything out, and you read their response, in that moment, it was clear as day that leadership across the board, from HR to the executive director to board of directors, is incompetent. Incompetent. Truly, no words. And I implore you to click on the link and look at everything that we clearly laid out for them, everything we clearly spelled out for them. And even that wasn't enough. All they wanted to do was protect their interests. And I responded to the board's email reflecting that frustration because I was at my wit's end. Enough was enough. Come February 23rd, I was terminated. And the way they went about doing so was truly one of the most traumatic events that I've ever experienced. I was completing my paperwork as it was nearing the end of my shift, the end of my day, and the senior operations director, the new one, comes into the office. I'm sitting across from Lamia Makadam, and he asks me, hey, we need to chat with you. It'll be me, you, and the HR manager. And I said, okay, so my supervisor's here. She'll be present for the meeting. They declined, even though Lamia had written a letter voicing how frustrating it's been that they are leaving her out of these meetings, these emails, and how she feels as though this is another act of retaliation and she's not able to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of her job if they keep her out of the loop of these things. I don't feel comfortable meeting with you guys if Lamia is not present. And they would not budge. They did not want her there. They just wanted to speak with me and me only. And again, I did not feel comfortable. I did not feel safe being in the room with the HR personnel who sought to silence me for the last several months. And I did not feel comfortable not having my supervisor there with me in the room. 15-20 minutes went by after we declined to meet with them, and they came back and they told me, we are terminating you. I have my own personal belongings dispersed throughout the office, and they're telling me, you need to leave, you need to leave. They're trying to rush me out. And I'm like, no, I'm going to make sure that the laptop is completely wiped of any information that I did not want on the laptop, just in case. And I also wanted to bid farewell to fellow staff members and employees that I grew to care about. Overall energy in the office felt weird. I also happened to be located in a specific part of the office that was like on the complete other side to where my car was parked. As he was trying to rush me out of the building, I'm like, my car, my stuff, everything is on the other side of the building. Like, please relax. It's not that serious. I grabbed a few of my personal belongings that I could, walked out of the clinic. As I'm walking out of the clinic looking for my coworkers to say bye to, I noticed the clinic is noticeably empty. It's almost as if they cleared out the entire building. This whole time, the HR manager is following behind me closely. I made an attempt to go say bye to my coworkers. My key fob is not working anymore because we use key fobs to enter certain parts of the building. And so I attempt to make my way back to the corridor in which we had just came from so I could rejoin Lamia and say bye to some of my fellow staff members. And before I can even get to her, the HR manager steps in front of me, is body checking me. That's when it was clear to me that they were trying to like create this moment, this unnecessary moment of like confrontation. And I'm like, you know what? We're not about to do this. I say my goodbyes to Lamia, I exit the property, and I walk around the entire building and go to the back where my car is parked. Come to find out later, maybe an hour after I arrived home, the reason why the office was so empty, they had confined all staff members to a certain part of the building and told them to not engage with me. Told them they could not speak to me, they could not say bye to me. And so that is when it dawned on me that they were very strategic in trying to create this moment of like confrontation so that way they could paint me out to be some sort of like aggressor. When the reality is I needed to collect my belongings. I wanted to say bye to fellow employees and staff members, and I needed to get to the other side of the building so I could get into my car. And interestingly enough, as I'm recording this video, I get a text from one of my former coworkers telling me that they essentially hired security and sent out a company-wide email stating that they captured an incident on their security cams, and this incident has given them no other choice but to hire a security officer who will be dressed in plain clothing so as to protect the office and staff members. As I'm explaining this to y'all, I'm just like, wow. I spent months trying to reason with these people, trying to share and bring up genuine concerns around things that me and my staff were experiencing, me and my coworkers were experiencing. And at every which way and turn, they sought to disregard, they sought to malign all of us, they sought to frame us as problematic, instigators, insufferable. And even in this final interaction where they've already won, they've already let me go, they've stripped me of my livelihood, they are now still trying to paint a narrative trying to push forward this idea that this person is an aggressor, this person is violent, this person is a risk and unsafe to our staff. They did the same thing with Lamia, that her wearing her cultural ethnic garment, the keffiyeh, could be a perceived risk by people who are coming into the organization to receive our services. It's very clear now, this repetition, this pattern. They sought out to isolate my coworkers and I as a means of, conquer and divide. They wanted to make sure they got me and me only in the room, had conversations with me and me only. They did not want witnesses. All of that was intentional, even up until the last interaction. Going as far as announcing to your whole staff, secluding them to one area of the building, telling them that they cannot engage, they cannot speak with me. These are co-workers I've worked alongside for months now. They had a narrative that they were trying to sell about me, members of my team, people who had been reporting. They want to make an example out of us. So yeah, ultimately, that's what I've been dealing with for the past 6-7 months. And I have worked several 9-to-5s. I have worked in several corporate environments, and I have never dealt with this level of racism, anti-blackness, discrimination, retaliatory behavior. Like, this is stuff you would typically expect from corporate institutions, right? Because they're all about the money. But nonprofits like this are no different. My experience with this nonprofit highlighted how exploitive in nature these non-for-profit organizations can be. With an organization like this, it is very clear their sole function is to seek out capital to sustain their critical day-to-day needs. They hire people reflective of the very target demographics they are trying to service in communities, then mistreat and abuse them on the inside. They play overseer. They decide what struggles and what systemic issues are worth affording attention to. They decide what struggles have merit, which takes precedence over the other. They set parameters and boundaries around what you're allowed to speak up on, who you're allowed to fight for, how you're allowed to fight for them. Everything is about meeting numbers for the month, grant deliverables, as opposed to addressing root causes, systemic barriers, figuring out tangible solutions on how to improve the well-being of the overall communities that you claim to serve. You expect this level of insidiousness from a corporate institution. You don't think that them making your life a living hell is much more of a priority to them than actually serving and doing what their mission, goals, and values state. You have these older white folk who are in positions of leadership who don't know how to lead a multi-generational, multiracial staff. Everything is their way or the highway. You have these services that are supposed to be given to the community that end up being gatekept by people like Morgan Manry, who have financial cushions, who isn't unhoused, who isn't dealing with food insecurity, who doesn't have to deal with the patient assistance coordinator gleefully kicking them out of Hep C programs. Hope and Help has been operating since 1988. And the things that I've discovered during my tenure at the organization, finding out that it was organizations like Hope and Help, the various ways in which they discriminated against Black folk and persons of color that ultimately led to the founding of other organizations in the area. Hearing several Black folk within my community share oral histories about this organization's rampant abuse and mistreatment of Black folk and persons of color. Seeing how much money this organization is raking in off of the plight, off the marginalizations of Black folk and persons of color within the community. It sickens me to my core. Hearing this after I had already taken the job, I had already immersed myself in the world of harm reduction and got so caught up in wanting to show up for people who don't have access to these resources down here, wanting to make the best out of the one syringe exchange program available in all of Central Florida. Having to reckon with that now, it's frustrating. It's pissing me off. It is pissing me off how much labor we gave to this organization. It's pissing me off how long I let it go for. It is pissing me off how much power they believe they have. And this isn't stuff that you could research online. These aren't stories that you can easily search up. These aren't stories that you can easily type up on Google and look for online. These are stories and these are experiences that you could only come across if you were in community with people who've been affected by this organization's behavior. And so that's why I'm making this video. I refuse to be silenced. I refuse to allow this behavior to go unchecked. I refuse to let this organization profit off of the struggles of marginalized folk in order to bolster the salary of an executive director who only shows up to work whenever she wants, one time every 2-3 weeks. And again, I want to emphasize that the executive director is very much responsible for the instability that exists in the workplace at this organization. Several members of the leadership have shared with me that they've had to endure endure this woman's verbal abuse. They've had to endure this woman's disrespect. They've had to endure this woman going as far as weaponizing her health condition as a means of forcing members of leadership into submission to pacify them. And so when my coworker Anita Nunez asserted that what we're dealing with is white woman fragility, she was in fact correct. The past 4 years that I've been making content online, people have always wondered why I'm always talking about being Black. I'm always talking about combating racism. I'm always talking about how white folk are anti-Black, because I've been dealing with this behind the scenes before anybody even knew what my name was, knew my face. I've been dealing with this since day one. I've been dealing with people like this since day one. I am 24 years old, and the amount of years and time that I have spent, the amount of years and time that I have given to corporate environments, that I've given to my jobs, employers, I'll never get back. The amount of years I spent code switching, adjusting the way I speak, adjusting the way in which I emotionally exercise myself and hold myself within certain environments, I will never get that time back. The trauma that's been inflicted on me in these spaces, I will spend the rest of my life unlearning. I will spend the rest of my life working through. The trauma that I endured the last 6, 7, 8 months is trauma that I will spend the rest of my life working through. And to only be 24, feeling this much angst, feeling this hopeless, feeling this distraught, there are no words. But these past 4 years that I have been able to make content and talk about my experiences and outright name and call out anti-Blackness, discrimination, the plight of Black folk living in the US, those have been moments where I've been able to reclaim my power. Making this video, calling out the mess in these spaces, is me reclaiming my power. Is me saying, I refuse to dim my light. I don't have to put up with it. I refuse to allow these institutions to weaponize my need to survive and make money in order to silence me. I said what I said. I am fortunate enough to be in an extremely privileged position to where I have a community that I can fall back on. I have people who support me. I have people who care about me. And that's what they don't bank on. With that being said, I have a few call to actions, and I am begging y'all to please assist me in amplifying this. There will be a link that you click on. It'll direct you to an email template. All the grant funding sources for the organization will be CC'd. All I am asking you guys to do is to forward these emails to the grant funding sources and urge them, implore them to heed our concerns about what's been happening within the organization at Hope and Help. As I've stated earlier, we have created a 40+ page doc detailing all the incidences that I've spoken about in this video from the all hands meeting up until now. We are calling for the immediate resignation of Lisa Barr, Wes Golan, Morgan Manry, and all 9 members of the board. These members of leadership do not abide by the stated values in their mission and vision. They do not care about the well-being of their staff. I can go out and find another job. Lamia can go out and find another job. Anita can go out and find another job. But the remaining staff members in which they receive grant funding on behalf of, they're still working there. They still have to put up with incompetent leadership. They are still there being forced to navigate that culture of toxicity, having to navigate that culture of sweeping things under the rug, silencing people who bring forth genuine concerns. But enough is enough. I hope each and every single one of them have the day they deserve.